Welcome to Stats and Scheme. I am Shawn Syed, joined as always by my good friend Seth. We made it through the best weekend of the year, football-wise at least. We only have 3 games left. Today we're going to talk about those 4 divisional games, look ahead to some of conference championship weekend. But first, how are you? Are you getting emotional that we're almost done with the playoffs? We're gonna crown a champion soon enough.
I do feel like Jason Kelsey at this point in the season where, I'm not really caring about my surroundings. I'm just kind of shirt off, enjoying the vibes. But yeah, I mean, it is sad to only have 3 games left in the season, but it's been a really great season. It's been really fun doing this and watching all the games for sure. How about you?
Well,
How do
we
you
will.
feel?
No, I mean, I'm super emotional about it. Tej, I'm an emotional guy. We'll have a retrospective, a reflection through the through the end of it. We'll see. People listening on the podcast, you'll have to tune into the YouTube to see if Tej is doing anything like Jason Kelsey. Tej, I think we'll review the games, offense, defense. We'll go through all 8 sides from the 4 games. We'll just go in chronological order. Go Texans offense versus Ravens defense. First, Tej, I feel like, and tell me if you agree with this, like the Ravens defense is the stats and scheme unit of the year. I think we've talked about it probably the most. Like we can give our little participation trophy. Obviously, they're fighting for a much more important trophy than that. But it is just such a fun team to break down, to watch week after week, because their defense, it is so versatile. I think they have answers to different problems that the offense presents. They have high level players. I love watching Kyle Hamilton, attack that bubble, really able to make a play there. The Ravens were the first team I think I've seen in at least 3 years to stop that fake screen left, fake screen right, kind of wide delay where the tight end ends up in the middle of the field, usually wide open. Kyle Shanahan special that he did a few years ago with George Kittle against the Seahawks. And they play so tight to routes. That's the one thing that whenever I'm watching the secondary, that is what I love to see. Whether you're playing man, whether you're playing zone, and they do it out of zone a lot, where people are actually like relating in smart ways to the receivers as opposed to just dropping into kind of a blank space. So I think that they do a really good job, and it feels like on film that they are really well coached. And sometimes that I think is a little bit hard to quantify for me. I feel like you know it when it's not there, and then you know it when it is there, because you can see how this defense looks against versus some other defense where maybe it feels like there isn't really like a theory behind what is going on. So just a unit that I haven't loved watching all year, and just such a shout out to Mike McDonald for really just shutting down all of the Shanahan offenses kind of one by one by one. So Tej, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the Texans offense versus the Ravens defense?
I like a lot of the points that you brought up there, and I do think again it was Mike McDonald shutting down a Shanahan offense, like you mentioned. He's done it to the 49ers. He's done it to the Texans in this game. Like I think over time he just continues to do it, and the Texans' offensive approach was interesting in this game. I still think that they were probably running the ball too much on first down, and that was setting them back on some possessions, especially in the first half. But they did overall finish with a plus 6.5% pass rate over expected in this game, which was 82nd percentile. But their running game was just so bad, especially on those early down rushes, that it put them behind the sticks often. They had an 8th percentile EPA on early downs, and that made their late down success rate 30% on the game, which is 13th percentile. And often when they were trying to throw the ball, you could really tell that they were missing having someone like Tank Dell in this game that could be a quick separator. As much as I like Nico Collins, and as much as I think Dalton Schultz has stepped up from time to time in this game, they are more of pass catchers that take longer to develop in their routes. And they got about 50% of the target share just between the two of them. But the success rate was 50% or lower when targeting both of them, just because they were taking longer to get open and the pressure was getting to them on the offensive line side of things.
The early down rushes thing, I think that's something that we've talked about multiple times now with the Texans, and it's a bummer. It feels like some of those downs are just getting burned, and I do think they're trying to set up some looks later in the game where they do get to some of those play actions, and it feels like someone's open, but the pressure gets there. What I hope that, if Bobby Slowick doesn't have or if he doesn't end up taking a head coaching job or getting a head coaching job, for him to come back next year. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun watching the offense again, because when we take these hot play callers, like you think about McDonald last year, you think about Ben Johnson, our good friend from the Lions last year, when they get that second year, like when they're really, really in the spotlight and they just have so many more opportunities to solve the problems within their system. We're going to talk about Ben Johnson later today, certainly about his problem solving. I really, really love seeing that. So I'm excited that if he ends up staying in Houston, we'll be able to see him kind of, you're poking at the ends of your offense a little bit. What is working, what is not. And hopefully we get to see, maybe a few less early down runs. I will say I was surprised to see the Ravens when I was watching live. Obviously, you didn't get to see the safeties. I was figuring, it's just a lot of too high kind of. They're staying in that and they're able to stop the run out of those light boxes. But they were rotating safeties down fairly often. I was surprised to see how much cover 3 that they ended up playing overall. They do a really good job. They hold it pretty late. That safety can get into the box. And when they're in those too high looks, something that's like just a random interesting point. When you get like crossers from one side and a vertical from the other side, where these Shanahan offenses, they love to do that out of those heavy sets. A lot of times safeties just get conflicted. The Ravens, like their safeties will turn in towards each other. Where a lot of times you'll see safeties instead turn out towards the receivers. And it feels like they do a good job of communicating it back and forth. So I'm excited to see what, Slovik's answers are as we head into next year going forward. And I think we do have to talk about just CJ Stroud pressured the whole entire day. I'm not sure. I don't remember if they ended up having a sack. I don't think they had a turnover and pressure to sack. I think you fully radicalized me on that just as just like an enormous part of a quarterback's game, which I don't think that's controversial to say really in any way, but he had a really, really special ability to do where he's able to get out of those, make some throws. A lot of times, it felt like there was no one open, but then the Ravens have a smart rush plan where McDonald's sending linebackers as like battering rams for stunts for defensive tackles. And that's really hard on the offensive line. So Tej, pressure to sack. I think that's going to be another theme really for today in a few different ways, obviously, as we get to Jordan Love later in the day. Kind of anything else you got thoughts on that side of the ball?
Yeah, the pressure to sack point is really good to bring up. I thought that Stroud did a great job of that and trying to avoid sacks to make plays downfield. But like you brought up, the Ravens defense is so well coached back to front, top to bottom, where it's just really hard to create even when you are able to escape the first or second pressure. The longer that you hold on to the ball when pressured, usually the average EPA on that play decreases. So, I respect Stroud for trying to make something happen on those plays. He was put in a tough situation in this game. And we saw that play out where the longer you hold on to the ball after the initial pressure, things that completions were harder to come out of things. And it was a little bit harder for the Texans offense to create.
Yeah, they had some issues there. A lot of penalties between false starts and things of that nature. I think they maybe made it a little bit harder on themselves than they would have hoped. Also, just watching Jadeveon Clowney eat up guys on outside zone, like he is still doing it, which is really, really fun. I think it's a great story and obviously a great coaching job, a great player in that space doing it this year. And as we look forward to the Texans, and of course we'll talk about the other side of the ball in a second, but last year I'm sure we texted about it when the Jaguars go out, they win that game against the Chargers, and we just assume these teams are going to make it back. And I do that. I always say, we're going to have 5 years of the Texans just making it this far. And that is, I think, a more fragile thing than I would like to admit, where we don't know really well if this team is going to come back. But Tej, I think both of us feel really, really optimistic about the Texans, particularly from an offensive standpoint. Your team is going to be run by your quarterback. I'm excited. We saw even in this game, like Slovak gets to a little bit more tempo and those quick snaps later on, where I thought that helped them. And kind of, again, like I said, year 2 in the system is a really important thing for me. So general optimism for the Texans from you as well?
For sure. I mean, the difference with the Jaguars and Texans, I think, going into this past offseason was the Jaguars spent a lot in free agency. The year before, they had a great year where they won a playoff game and won the division. For the Texans side of things, like, they weren't pushing a ton into free agency last year because they probably didn't realize that they would be as good as they were this year. So they're still walking into next season with around $57 million of cap space from over the cap, which is the 6th most in the NFL. So a lot of room to work with. They had a lot of 1-year free agent deals that they're probably going to have to decide whether they want to re-sign or let them walk. Like Dalton Schultz is a good example of that. And they have some pretty key defensive players that I'm sure they'll make similar decisions on, but they have the cap room to bring some of those guys back and then also look towards adding some other pieces to their offense and defense.
And then I'm pretty sure in the Will Anderson trade, I think the first from this year was gone, but they still have the first from Cleveland. I think, I'm not sure if in that same trade they got rid of their third, but they have a 3rd round pick from Philadelphia this year. So they still have draft picks despite really making that big trade. So excited I'm sure we'll talk about that team building a bunch this offseason, but let's flip it to the other side of the ball continue to give just a lot of praise to the Ravens offense versus Texans defense. I will say it was really fun to watch the Texans defense. It has been fun. They're just so competitive, which that's another word where I feel like it's a little bit coach speaky, where can you quantify that? However you quantify it, you can see that it in the Texans. I thought they did a good job of, when you send pressure at Lamar Jackson, you obviously have a fear that he can break the pocket, make a big play. But part of the thought behind that is you're closing some of his escape lanes in a way that he can't do that. And I think that was a really, really smart approach. And then we see some of those big scrambles when the Texans are only rushing 4 and they're dropping back. They obviously want to relate to the routes in different ways. But to me, really, the second half, Tej, was a story of Todd Monken. I thought he was awesome in the second half. You get to a lot of those quick throws. You get to some of those blitz beaters. You use motion in different ways that you can not fully predict where the blitz is coming from, but maybe you can bump the defense out of having that blitz where they're going to auto check out based on certain formations. And then you see some good old Greg Roman plays where you have the kind of fake power and then quarterback keep the other side, where the Ravens ran it against the Lions on a 4th down earlier in the season. You had the kind of sweep pass where he's running all the way out to the right. They ran it against the Saints, I think, last year. But those are very clearly like, these are plays that I'm not sure if Greg Roman thought of them, but they aren't like Monken originals by any means. And not that really any plays are original, but I just love seeing that. And this was an example of really on the offense and the defense where they just didn't let good stop them from being great. It's not easy, I think, to say we're able to win double-digit games pretty much every year. And sometimes, obviously with the Lamar injury, but to go to Monken and McDonald, it's so hard to project what's a coordinator going to be. Is this coordinator going to be able to do new things? But going from Roman and Wink to Monken and McDonald has been just such a thrill to watch, because we get to see obviously Lamar in a more open offense. We get to see the passing game more developed. But in this game on this side as well, I felt really it was an awesome job by the Texans in terms of that first half game planning and really good response by Todd Monken, especially in that passing game. Tesh, talk to us a little bit about the Ravens offense versus the Texans defense.
I do think it's a lot of Todd Monken, but I also think it's having receiving options that can win for you when everything's not perfect. And that is what Lamar Jackson has been given this year. With you look at Zay Flowers, for example, he had a 24% target share in this game, which led the team, and he had an 80% success rate when targeted. So very, very good job of Zay Flowers, making the most of his targets in this game. You look at the connection that Lamar Jackson and Nelson Agholor have developed that has really come out of nowhere. I think been a surprise to most people. Nelson Agholor had a 19% target share in this game, which was second most behind Zay Flowers, did pretty good with his targets. And then Isaiah Likely also stepped up with a 14% target share and that pretty big, touchdown where it was a very cool way to score a touchdown, just kind of like grabbing the ball off of the defender's back. So you look at all that stuff, and then you brought up the quicker throws and having answers to that. Next Gen Stats put out some information on this. Lamar Jackson faced a career high 50 or 75% blitz rate in this game. D'Amico Ryans grinded and leaned into the high variance, which I really respect. And in the first half, his time to throw when blitz was 3.51 seconds, which is really, really high, much higher than his season average at 2.94. But in the second half, that time to throw went down to 2.25 seconds when blitzed. So he went more than a second quicker when blitzed and started doing a lot better when that happened. So I think that it was a combination of Monken scheming up quicker throws, the receivers like Flowers and Agholor and Likely being able to win quicker, and Lamar understanding what the Texans game plan was and taking advantage of it.
Really good point on the receivers there. You see Zay Flowers have that beautiful, just breaking that out route. And that's not something that we've seen from the Ravens really throughout the last few years. So I'm happy that we saw that. I want you to talk a little bit more. So I think you mentioned it in terms of Stroud on the offense. So like a higher time to throw, your EPA is going to go down. So they're inversely proportional kind of from like a time to throw perspective. Is that right?
Yeah, so Zach Drapkin, who now works for the Eagles but used to write for Pro Football Focus, did an article on this a couple years ago where he showed that when you are not pressured, the longer your time to throw will increase your average EPA on that play. But when you're pressured, the longer you hold on to the ball once you're pressured will decrease your EPA on that play. You look at someone like, Russell Wilson, where if he's holding on to the ball for a while, once he's pressured, like usually more bad things happen. Fumble could happen. He could throw into coverage, like different stuff like that. But when you're not pressured, if you're holding on to the ball for a while, like Lamar usually does, it's beneficial for you.
I think that makes a lot of sense. That's an easy like stats match the scheme in so many ways. When you're pressure and you're running around, you're probably running towards the sideline. A lot of times that just ends up in a throwaway. And then you see Lamar is actually a really good example of this, I think, exact phenomenon, if you want to call it that. But when he is in the pocket and just hanging out there, someone is going to get open. It's just too hard to cover people for that long. We'll talk about Ravens Chiefs and look ahead towards the end of the podcast, but we can talk about another quarterback doing a good job escaping in different ways. We'll talk about Packers 49ers from the Packers offense perspective versus the 49ers defense. And Tej, I just like love Aaron Jones. I just love watching him play. I always have. I'm always thrilled when he's just running on the sidelines, when he's coming into games with sombreros and everything. But I was surprised by how many times the Packers receivers, it was at least 3 really nice examples where you have receivers slamming down on defensive ends, like Chase Young being pinned down by a receiver just enough. So I think that's a really, really big testament to the Packers in the run game. Obviously, I think we are going to remember that last throw, which was real unfortunate, but I like to think about the bigger body of work, and we'll do the same thing when talking about the other quarterback in this game. I thought that a lot of times, there was just good coverage from the 49ers, and a lot of Jordan Love's throws ended up being outside the numbers, where he's able to challenge those 49ers defensive backs, where the middle of the field, which how many times are we going to say, Tej, that the middle of the field is extremely valuable, that Fred Warner can erase that. And that's something that we'll talk about in the 49ers next game as well. But just, LaFleur just constantly using motion in different ways, finding things, make it, and that 2-point conversion, you get a really good example there. We talked about it obviously with the Packers against the Cowboys, but the 49ers really disciplined. They stayed at home when you got that like front side leak play. So when the Packers are taking some of those shots, the 49ers are able to kind of stay at home on that. So what do you got to say about the Packers offense versus the 49ers defense?
That's a great point to bring up about the middle of the field. When you look at Jordan Love in this game, he only had 8 pass attempts over the middle of the field, while he had 26 pass attempts on non-middle of the field throws. And he was a lot better when throwing to his left or right than he was throwing over the middle of the field. He only had 2 of his 8 passes over the middle of the field be deemed as successful plays. So I think when you look at, again, what the 49ers linebackers can do, like you mentioned, with Fred Warner, it was really difficult for the Packers to throw over the middle of the field. And it relied a lot on throwing outside and hoping that Love could make throws, which he did from time to time, but also the 2 interceptions that both happened over the middle of the field left him with 1.6 total EPA on the day. So I think it was a combination of that, and also the 49ers defense really locking up in the fourth quarter. The Packers had a really, really good third quarter passing the ball, 64% success rate in the third quarter passing the ball. That's when they had the fake screen wheel touchdown that we both really liked. But then in the fourth quarter, they went to a 33% success rate when passing. And I think some of the targets that were forced to Aaron Jones, his checkdowns was a good job by the 49ers defense to force that. And then also the 49ers did a good job guarding Tucker Kraft and forcing some incompletions when it was thrown to him. So they did it. I felt like they really turned the game around, especially like late in the game when they were able to make their adjustments and slow down the Packers offense and cause those 2 interceptions.
Are the Packers offense and Packers as a team similar to Texans? Do you think we should be positive about them kind of going forward? They're obviously very young. I think they have this past year, they had a lot of, I think, dead cap, obviously off of, I think, dealing with the Aaron Rodgers contract and such, but they should, I think, look good going forward. We feel pretty positive about them going specifically in that division where things might shake up for Detroit if their coach is out of there next year.
I do think so. I think the NFC North is about to get really interesting, actually, with how Jordan Love took a step up this year. The Bears having the number 1 overall pick and what they do with that. And then if the Vikings decide to go with Kirk Cousins again or go drafting or signing a different quarterback route. So I think you're about to see some pretty competitive football in the NFC North. And I think that the Packers and Lions will be like neck and neck favorites next year, but it's going to be pretty close to see how that exactly shakes out.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun divisional preview to do. I'm sure maybe we'll talk about it in the offseason. Yeah, what's that offense in Detroit going to look like without Ben Johnson, Tej? I know you're thinking a lot about that. And Tej, talking a little bit about the 49ers offense versus the Packers defense, we really do have to just take it to Brock Purdy. And you can think about there was rain that may have caused an issue. Obviously, Deebo Samuel goes down in this game. That is a whole problem for the offense, where you certainly think that they had a lot planned around Deebo in this game. I think that Purdy just missed a lot of throws. I think that could have been a function of Green Bay doing a really, really good job with that interior pressure. I thought there were some open throws that Purdy ended up missing. You have 2 throws that easily could have been intercepted, especially that early one. So that, I think, it makes you feel a little bit on your, kind of walking on eggshells watching from the 49ers perspective, because even if you have those last 2 drives, maybe against Detroit next week, it doesn't matter where you're behind by too much at that point. So that's something that I think we'll definitely look a little bit further into and project for next week when talking about their matchup with Detroit. But Tish, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the 49ers offense versus the Packers defense?
Yeah, so you bring up an interesting point about Purdy's catchable versus non-catchable throws, and FTN data charts whether a pass was deemed as catchable or not, which I think is really helpful when looking at performance based on these 2 conditions. And the 49ers offense on the season ranks first in EPA per play when the ball is charted as catchable. So you think about just like what the weapons can do when they throw in a catchable ball, the yards after catch opportunities from getting a catchable ball thrown to you, and what it can do once you are able to catch the ball. But they rank 20th when the ball is not charted as catchable. So the pass catching options, as good as they are, aren't doing a great job of, supporting, what happens when the ball is not catchable. And that's why it's so important for Purdy to throw accurate balls in these next couple games here that he's going to have if the 49ers do end up making the Super Bowl, because he is going to need to be throwing these catchable balls so that the 49ers offense, which lead the league in yards after catch, can actually have that condition of making something happen after the catch. So when you look at this game as a whole from a pass catching option, like there were a lot of throws to Christian McCaffrey, that were more checkdowns. And I think just because of the way that Green Bay was getting pressure, like you brought up, I think that Purdy had to resort to that a lot of the time. But I think that it was so huge for Juwan Jennings to step up for the 49ers in this game. When Deebo Samuel went out, they were, a little bit lost on offense, but Jennings really came through to them, especially late in the game. And then obviously George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk are always going to be, high target share, high success rate when targeted players. But with someone like Jennings stepping up, if Deebo can't go for the NFC Championship game, is going to be really important.
Okay, Tish, I think you need to break this down again for me. So you're saying when the 49ers throw what's charted as uncatchable, so more or less like inaccurate pass, they are obviously much lower. So do we kind of attribute that, like, I guess when I'm thinking about this for the 49ers, when you have, especially, in progression passing, where a lot of these guys are running across the field, like a pass that is thrown behind a receiver, I think or maybe not, but it could be a lot harder for that receiver to bend backwards and make that catch, as opposed to if you consider like, oh, this is just like too high for them. I guess I'm trying to think, well, what is the attributes of a team or maybe a player, like a receiver, that like they're doing really well when it's in like charted as uncatchable ball? Do you think those that are just really high? Is that like balls that maybe are thrown behind the receiver? I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I do think it's a lot of that. Like when you look at like a team like the Steelers, who, are still ranked pretty highly, like even when the ball is not catchable, it's like because that you have someone like George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, like players that can make opportunities out of non-catchable balls. But for the 49ers, they are built off yards after catch opportunities. So I think that when you look at like their contested catching abilities or their ability to make something happen, even if they're slowed down, like you said, when the ball is behind them, like I don't think that they are able to do as well when that happens. But obviously when the ball is catchable, they're able to do really, really well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have to imagine it's a little bit route specific. Like if it's a vertical route, you can adjust kind of in more ways. So Tej, when I'm looking at this game overall and thinking about it, from 49ers offense perspective, one view of it is, wow, they won with Deebo hurt, with Purdy not playing his best game, with the ball slipping out of his hands constantly, and with whatever happened between halftime management that I don't even think we need to mention or talk about right now. Or is that your perspective, that like, oh, they made it, like they could win even when they have playing like this? It's wild. Or is it, this is a team that is vulnerable. They are absolutely a Death Star, but also a glass cannon where, if you have Samuel hurt, where obviously it seems like that shoulder injury is at least going to hurt him in this game. I'm not sure if he is out. We'll, of course, get more information as Sunday gets a little bit closer. Which of those two perspectives do you think you're taking on this one?
That's a really good question. I think it's more of the latter, where I still think that this offense has so many weapons that they'll be able to survive. Usually when I look at these things, or when you look at offenses like this, you want to see 3 weapons that can make a difference in these games. And I think what's made the 49ers so special this year is they've had more than 3. But when you still have McCaffrey, Kittle, and Ayuk going at full strength, and then if Debo does play but is limited, I still think that that'll be enough weapons to supply them in the NFC Championship game.
I like that 3 magic number for offensive weapons. I think that makes a lot of sense. And when we get to talking about the Chiefs, I think we'll see how the Ravens deal with 2, 2.5, 3, however many you want to talk about there. And like you said, Brandon Ayuk, I mean, he's gonna have a lot of fun, I think, against the Lions secondary. But we'll go to Lions Bucks and take it first from the Lions offensive perspective against the Bucks defense. I thought the Bucks defense really early on and throughout did just a great job tackling, which that was maybe not surprising, but I think you see a lot of these offenses, particularly when they're attacking the middle of the field, like the Lions love to do. You're going to get guys that are running after the catch. And obviously Jahmyr Gibbs is first team all he moves different, particularly for our podcast. So I was really, really impressed that they did a good job against run. I felt like, okay, this is a defensive front that is really strong. They can do well against run, but just making those tackles in space is such a big deal. But you drop that interception in the end zone. That's a real big bummer. You see Jahmyr Gibbs pick up blitz once or twice that I thought was pretty impressive. I'm glad to see him do that. How hard is Ragnar going to work as a center, having to deal with Vita Vea the entire game, with how many injuries he's going to have? And like you see it even on one of the later touchdowns, he got rolled up on again, which I didn't even remember seeing, because I think the TV copy cut to just a celebration so quick. But something that we can talk about Ben Johnson even more, something I haven't, I think, mentioned specifically about him. I think that he understands that Penei Sewell is an offensive weapon. Like, he obviously is not a skill position player, but when they run that play where they kind of bluff the defensive end and he's pulling out into space and getting him moving in different ways, I don't think a lot of people have the ability to see their offensive linemen as weapons, because a lot of people don't have offensive linemen that are weapons like that. I think the Eagles do that and have done that with Jason Kelce in a lot of ways when he's pulling up. So I like that Ben Johnson is able to do that and use a different player in a different way. And then you also see Sewell doing such a good job cutting off the backside of that Jahmyr Gibbs big run, and similar with Christian McCaffrey's big run on those outside zone plays. You want to stretch the defense one way, but you really have to cut off the backside of the defense to get the running back to cut up and vertical. So those backside blocks are such a big deal. So Tej, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the Lions offense versus the Bucks defense?
Yeah, again, like I think that you brought up some really good points there, and I do have to start with Ben Johnson's decision to go foot on the gas pedal in this game from a pass perspective. The Lions had by far their highest pass rate over expected in any game this season at plus 18.2% in this game, which was 99th percentile. And their second highest pass rate over expected game was also against Tampa Bay last time they played early in the season at plus 13.1%. So Tampa Bay's defense has created this pass funnel where they're top 10 against the run because of Vita Vea in a large part, but they're below average against the pass. And I think it was a really good game plan from Ben Johnson to put the ball in Jared Goff's hands, and they were able to pass really well in this game when doing so, and taking advantage of some of the Buccaneers injuries, especially in the second half with the St. Brown touchdown. And I like that they also used the pass to set up the run in this game. They were passing a lot early in the game. And then, like you mentioned, with the Jahmyr Gibbs touchdown, they were able to take advantage of a lighter box from Tampa Bay on that run and be able to score a touchdown on this play. So it was really good to see that. And I think Todd Bowles didn't blitz early in the game because he wanted to throw the Lions off a little bit. But when he cranked that up in the second half, Jared Goff kept his time to throw low against the blitz in this game. He's done that the entire season. He's at the 7th quickest time to throw against the blitz on the season. So as long as he keeps doing that, I think that he can execute the offense well enough to get the ball in the hands of the pass catchers like St. Brown and Laporta and even Gibbs and Josh Reynolds when needed to.
Yeah, I thought Goff, there was like one really, really good example where he stood in there late. He threw just a fireball. And I think it was Vita Vea who was like about to clobber him. And that's a really, really big deal, I think, for a passer in so many different ways. I think that it was fun watching the Bucs defensive line back. Like you see Kalijah Cansey really just kind of continuing to emerge. You wonder, is especially with those injuries in the interior, like, Javon Kinlaw coming to obviously in Santa Clara, but he's, I think, going to have a fun time against that Lions offensive line if they're banged up. And then like kind of I talked about Todd Monken with his problem solving. It felt like Ben Johnson saved some of those really, really, those beautiful plays. Like you see the tight end just leaking into open space for a really smart time for when to use it. And then the awesome touchdown, I'm pretty sure it was Josh Reynolds, where it's, I think the offense was an empty kind of inside the red zone just a little bit. And the defense, they're playing like a 3-over-2 defense over St. Brown and Reynolds, who are 2 of the 3 receivers to the empty side. And then really once St. Brown clears that inside linebacker, the safety then has to take St. Brown vertical, who again, St. Brown was the innermost player on that play. And he starts to pull away from the safety so Reynolds can just work right into open space. So to me, that was just an example of a really nice design that was meant to beat a very specific coverage from a very specific formation on a very specific part of the field. They get the coverage they're expecting. They have the design work like as good as you possibly have it, and get 6 points. But again, his Ben Johnson is just problem solving throughout the game. It feels like that is something where in that, you get to call plays for another year. That's just something that's special. And I don't know how healthy Sam Laporta is. He still runs super smooth routes, even when it feels like he's kind of hobbled on one leg, and he like skied for that almost touchdown towards the end of the game. So you hope they're healthy. And then we have to talk about just Campbell's like overall aggressiveness. It feels like it is like organizational aggression from the top down. And it feels like it is very, very clearly made, because the go for it decisions are a certain thing. But then, as you said, with the offensive play call, that is a certain thing. It doesn't feel like Ben Johnson is going to get tight in some of those situations, because he knows he has the support, I think, top down in terms of being that aggressive. And then when we look at just like, who's going for it the most on fourth downs in reasonable situations, it feels like, Harbaugh in Baltimore has maybe backslid a little bit, but even then you see the clips where he's like asking Lamar, he's like, hey, Lamar, do you want to go for it? And it feels like sometimes, maybe whatever the fallacy like that, he trusts his defense a little bit more. So he's more comfortable kind of punting it back and forth. But just love, like, you have to love the Lions. Like, I know that you love the Lions, but it's just such a great, great story kind of throughout. So anything else on that end, or do you think we should have flipped to the other side of the ball?
Yeah, 2 things quickly on Dan Campbell and in-game decisions, or maybe I'll save the second one for when we talk about the other side of the ball. But we do have a win probability added over expected model on in-game decisions. So basically takes all fourth down decisions, all 2-point decisions, whether you're using timeouts in the first half, second half, or saving them, how you're doing with delay of games, and whether you are returning kickoffs or fair catching, touchbacking them, or doing a touchback on them, and puts it all together. Eric has built this model, and Dan Campbell has added plus 93% of win probability added over expected this season on these different in-game decisions, which is first in the entire NFL. Andy Reid, out of just the conference championship coaches, Andy Reid is second, has made pretty good fourth down decisions this year. John Harbaugh is third, still plus EV on in-game decisions, but has, like you mentioned, regressed a little bit in the fourth down department. And then Kyle Shanahan has made good fourth down decisions, but hasn't had as good of, timeout and kickoff decisions. So I think that's something to take into account as we head into conference championship weekend.
Yeah, especially if we say these games are really decided by the thinnest of margin. It feels like a lot of times in this, it is sometimes less about, well, what is the small schematic change that this team did, and more about, well, what are these really small individual decisions that make a difference? And Tish, WPAOE, like I feel like we need maybe a prettier acronym than that. We'll figure it out, I think, in the offseason. The kickoff one is interesting, and I think something that we'll dig into at a later time, because, as a return team, if the average starting field position is less than the 25-yard line, every time you take it out, you're risking injury, you're risking penalties. There's like, why would you want to risk that? I guess there is obviously that maybe a smaller tail end where you're obviously getting those long returns. I think that that's something that we'll need to study a little bit, and talk to Eric a little bit about it, because when a team kicks off, then is it like who is to blame when the ball doesn't go through the back of the end zone? So let's transition to the other side there, the Bucs offense versus the Lions defense, Tage, the Lions secondary it has trouble with the number one receiver. I think that Mike Evans early on had a few drops and then really was able to figure it out in a few different ways. And I'm just like, I am really thinking ahead to what does it look like when specifically Brandon Ayuk on the outside for the Lions? What is your plan there? And I thought the Lions did, a good job in different ways where they had, Burns coming off the edge, or sorry, not Burns, Branch coming off the edge, off like against a specific motion a few times where I felt like they were really smart in how they created tackles for loss. But something that surprised me was the Buccaneers. They were able to gash them in the run game a few times where specifically in some of that wide zone where the 49ers are going to run that a whole lot. And then just continued shout out to Dave Canales, because the last time we'll be able to shout him out for the season, that like instead of a fake screen wheel, we get a fake screen seam, which is, I'm not even sure if that was, I assume that was meant to be called, but when the cornerback is expanding like that, I like that as a way to get your player into space a little bit quicker. And then, you see Aiden Hutchinson. I think that when I was looking at some of the stats at this point of the season, obviously he gets those extra games, but he's like one behind Max Crosby in total pressures, which is just awesome to see. And this is an example. I think that his sack numbers are a fair bit lower than what those project to. You hope that in the future, as you get continued pressure, you're able to convert some of those to sacks. But in this game, a lot of time it was unblocked pressure where it felt like, I don't know, Tej, I'm always hesitant on who do you blame in that situation. It felt like, maybe the quarterback offensive line weren't on the exact same page, or that the quarterback slid the offensive line one way, had a free runner coming off of one side, and then did not, execute your hot in the quickest way possible. But there were a lot of times where Baker had some really nice throws and, just a tip of the cap. I don't think I expected him to have as good of a season as he had. And I think they really showed up throughout a lot of this game. So what are your thoughts kind of on the Bucs offense versus the Lions defense?
Look, all the air I've given out about Baker Mayfield decreasing his sack rate this year, decreasing his pressure to sack rate this year. And then in this game, he just didn't have a good understanding of like where these slot pressures and slot blitzes were coming from the Lions defense, and was taking a lot of sacks on these. And you look at like the game immediately after with Mahomes and Allen, where they're just doing such a good job of understanding where the blitzers are coming from and avoiding the pressure. And as well as Baker has done this year as a quarterback, and especially in the sack department, he just didn't have a great game from that perspective. And that was the difference for Lions defense. Aaron Glenn did a really good job of dialing up those different blitzes. And Aiden Hutchinson is someone who was a very high pressure rate, but lower sack rate player for the first like 10, 11 games of the season. A lot of the pressures that he was getting were later into the snaps, like right when the quarterback was about to release the ball. And now I think he's developed some better pass rush moves to get home quicker and to affect the quarterback sooner, which has been nice to see. But I mean, the overall point of this game is, even despite all of that, the Lions have given up the most yards per game to wide receivers in the NFL. And that was no different in this game with Mike Evans going off and having a huge day. So that's a given when the Lions defense is out there. I still think that Glenn can do stuff to mitigate that at points and get sacks and pressures, but Lions secondary still needs some help from a corner perspective. What was a little worrisome to me as a Lions fan watching this game was they normally have a really stout run defense, and it's something that they've committed resources to and have done a good job at stopping the run this year. And Rachaad White was having a pretty good day, especially in the first half. So hopefully that's something that tightens up for them going into San Francisco here. But last thing I want to mention was going for 2 down 8. I see, there are a lot of discourse on this topic. Todd Bowles made the right decision by the math. It's not even analytics that is driving the decision to go for 2 down 8. It's really just probabilities and math. When you are going for 2 down 8, assuming you score another touchdown, if you miss that first 2-point conversion, you have that second touchdown 2-point conversion to go for 2 again and tie the game and give you a 50-50 shot at winning in overtime. But if you do convert that first 2-point conversion, all you need is an extra point to win the game after your second touchdown, and extra points have a 94% chance of being converted. So that would give you 2 pats to win the game there. Whereas if you have to kick the extra point after both touchdowns, you are at best going to overtime, or you miss one of the extra points and you lose the game outright directly there. So that's why Todd Bowles went for 2 down 8. I saw a lot of people that weren't familiar with that topic. The Packers and Titans won games off of that exact strategy earlier this season. So, it was a good decision by Todd Bowles. Just didn't really like the goal line fade play call there from Canales, who otherwise had a good game.
Yeah, Tej, I was avoiding talking about it because it feels like it's kind of like clear to me, I guess, that I always view analytics like it is just information. When you're watching film, you look at the yard lines, you look at the down, you look at the distance, you look at how many players are in the box. I think that to discount just really all kind of any information, even if you view it as like totally made up or people are making up stats, I just think it does a disservice to the game for you to just close yourself off to a lot of information. And I have a lot of strong opinions, and I like to think them. You have strong opinions. You maybe just hold them a little bit loosely. But I appreciate the lesson in expected value. But even if you don't want to dig into either, like, don't you just want to see more points? Everyone, come, just let everyone go for 2. Let everyone go for 4th down. Let's keep it simple. Let's be aggressive. But to go from the math to going to now something that's just like uber emotional. The Bills lost to the Chiefs. We will talk about Chiefs offense versus Bills defense first. I know, look, neither of us are Bills fans. Neither of us like grew up and went to Orchard Park or wherever the Bills stadiums have been. I don't know how do you do it as a Bills fan to have to go through it again, where both of us we can't quit Josh Allen, guys. Well, I will never quit Josh Allen until further notice, of course. But to have this game go down again as a loss, that was a good example of when we talked about, if you, for one game, do you want to have high success rate? Do you want to have a high EPA per play? Like, the explosive plays really do make such a difference. I don't know if you just have any kind of like prefatory thoughts. Like, how do we deal with this? We have to deal with it again, where it felt like, obviously, you see LeBron lose to the Warriors a bunch of times, and it takes a few times where when you're really, really good and then you run into the best, it is just, it's just such a bummer, Tej.
I'm totally with you. I mean, I really feel for Bills fans to have to go through this every year and to lose a little bit more confidence that you can actually do it season by season here, where Josh Allen, I do believe, is the second best quarterback in the NFL. And if you were going with tier rankings, like, you put other quarterbacks in his tier, and I'm definitely fine with that. But NFL redraft, he would go number 2 overall. It's just every single season in the postseason, he has to run into the guy who would go number 1 overall in these quarterback redrafts. And that guy is in a tier of his own. And Mahomes is just inevitable at this point, where you're going to face him in the playoffs, and that you're going to get a very, very high percent game from him, where, again, like, Chiefs had 91st percentile EPA per play in this game. They averaged 8.5 yards per play. When Mahomes was dropping back, they had 16 total EPA on this game on those plays, and they were just so explosive this entire game against a Bills defense that really tried to put it together with all the injuries they had. But 3 explosives from Kelsey, 2 by MVS, who stepped up in this big game, 1 by Rashee Rice, and then 2 rushes were the 9 explosive plays that the Chiefs had in this game. And that just really increased their margin for error when they kept having these explosives. Well, on the Bills side of things, they didn't have many explosives at all in this game, only a 3.8% explosive play rate. And so they had to just keep hoping that they were able to convert these 3rd down plays where they're only averaging 4.7 yards per play. And they just kept putting a lot of pressure on their offense. And in the 4th quarter, we saw their run game start to get stuffed more often, and they weren't able to put it together as well. And that's what leads to, again, the Chiefs beating the Bills by 3 points in the playoffs.
Yeah, just again, just so unfortunate. And 2 things can obviously be true. Josh Allen can be awesome and show you awesome things, and then him, unfortunately, not be the best quarterback, even on the field in that same day. I'm glad you mentioned MVS. Like, I'm so glad for our guy. He get those 2 big plays. I'm sure the Chiefs are happy that he was able to make them. I'm sure they'll look for them to have some of those plays against Baltimore as well, where I'm sure they'll prioritize, Rice and Kelsey. I did want to, mention that 12 and 13 personnel that we saw a bunch from the Chiefs, especially. That was, I think, a smart decision, where you go against Buffalo, where they just don't have a lot of healthy guys left on defense. So even when they are healthy, they want to be in nickel for so much of the game. 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, get that nickel defender. He's going to have to roll into the box a lot. But when you're a team that can comfortably and confidently, and then run multiple things out of 12 and 13 personnel, you can manipulate teams alignment wise, whether, we want to bump this specific defender back in the box because we don't think they're the best tackler, or we know that we can attack them in the pass game where they're going to have their eyes in the backfield. And you can create advantages in the run game and absolutely in the pass game, where you get to that look on the goal line where Kelsey's kind of attached. It feels like a run. They throw a quick screen out and make that happen. So I know a lot of times I think when I know that we'll both say like, personnel diversity, 12 and 13 personnel, do it more and more. It does have to still have like a theory behind it where, you can attack in multiple different ways. Why are you doing it? Are you trying to bring specific people into the box? Do you think that you can run on this light box? So I'm glad that we saw that a bunch because, as an offense, you need to earn your one high looks. You have to do it some way, whether is it the threat of the run? Is it formationally? Is it specific players that you have? So and then obviously we can talk about Mahomes till however long. It is really an honor to watch Pat Mahomes play. As kind of corny as that sounds, same with Josh Allen, really. But to be able to witness the best at his best in so many different ways is awesome. You get to see that pump fake where it's not really a pump fake. It's like it feels like when you're playing your brother in backyard football. I'm the youngest. I know you have a younger brother, so I'm on the opposite end, getting pump faked and jumping like through the sky as much as I can. But just finding different ways. You use motion to beat the Bills, where you get Kelsey on that wide open touchdown. You're forcing a miscommunication where you have two tight ends to a side, and you can see on the film like this guy is jumping up. They're trying to communicate something, but they're not able to get it across. You get Kelsey in the backfield running that kind of sail route, and I don't know if you agree. It felt like Kelsey did look just like a step quicker. Maybe it's just over time he's healing a little bit. But anything else on that end before we flip to the other side?
I think Kelsey was, kind of doing the thing like you brought up LeBron earlier, where it's like LeBron and sometimes his Cavs teams would like take it a little bit easier in the regular season and then turn it up a notch for the playoffs. I think that might have been what Kelsey was doing there, because you could tell he was taking some hits that he was kind of avoiding more during the regular season. So it was nice to see that. Nice to see him back in more of the Kelsey form that we were used to from the past couple of years.
All right, let's talk about the other side here. Bills offense versus Chiefs defense. But Kansas City, they limited explosive plays. I don't think it was just that Buffalo's game plan going in was let's dink and dunk all the way down the field. I thought there were a bunch of times where you see Allen, he's taken that fake toss or that kind of play fake where they have deeper developing routes. But Kansas City's defense, specifically those safeties, did a good job taking a lot of that away. And instead of Allen, just throwing it straight into a defender's hands, he did a good job taking, I think, some of those checkdowns, still getting, 8-10 yard gains. And then at the end of the game, just throwing absolute launches right into guys' hands in a lot of ways, where those are difficult catches, of course. But I think that going back to the film, Allen does a good job of not like putting his hands on his knees and leaning over and being like so exasperated. I'm sure internally he was really burning up, because some of those are so ridiculous. And even like when he's rolling left, that throw into the end zone that ended up being a touchdown, like that's nonsense. Like how does a quarterback make that? I'm glad that we get to see that. So overall, just like a very clearly low ADOT game. I think not just artificially, like that was a good job by the Chiefs defense. And then towards the end of the game, you get to see Chris Jones just on the edge for real. I don't think he had that many snaps on the edge in this game, but when you see Chris Jones on the edge, you know something big is about to happen. And that play towards the end, where I think that people may criticize him, why don't you just take that throw underneath? I'm comfortable with him throwing that vertical ball there. Like we're going for the kill there, but also like when the defense presents a certain look and you have a vertical route, I mean, what are we doing? Not throwing that ball? But then Chris Jones is able to walk that, I think it was left tackle, back into Allen and bump him off his spot. So just a real unfortunate one in the end there. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about the Bills offense versus the Chiefs defense?
I'm with you with the decision to throw it to Shakir there instead of taking Gibbs on the crosser. That could have been the go-ahead touchdown for the Bills. It would have reminded me, pretty similarly of throwing to Gabe Davis in this exact game 2 years ago when the Bills went up before the Chiefs got the ball back. So, I like that decision from Allen. I thought that, it was definitely fine to make that decision. And the result wasn't there, even if the process was. But what really changed in this game, I thought, was the Bills were able to run the ball really well in the first three quarters. They averaged a 72% success rate in quarters 1 through 3 when running the ball. And I think that was shown out in the game when we were watching. And then in the fourth quarter, the Chiefs run defense really tightened up. The Bills only got 14 yards on 8 rushes in the fourth quarter. It made things really difficult on Josh Allen. The pass offense, you saw the deep shots stem out of that in the fourth quarter, and the Bills pass catchers just weren't able to take advantage of that. So I thought it was a good job by the Chiefs, really just tightening up, cranking up the intensity on defense in the last quarter of this game to force the Bills to have to grind out these drives. And then it was really like the whether it was intentional or not, the trap of like keep the ball away from Mahomes and really like have these extending drives where you're having like 6-7 minute drives and Mahomes is getting fewer possessions doesn't really work out, because you have to do minus EV things to actually keep the ball away from Mahomes, like running the ball a lot. The Bills had a minus 5.3% pass rate over expected in this game. They whether it was Chiefs defense, Bills offense, or combination of the both, like I mentioned, their explosive play rate was really, really low in this game at only 4th percentile, 3.8%. So the Bills were just trying to maybe keep the ball away from Mahomes, and that's a very tough thing to sustain over the entire game, even if you have someone like Josh Allen who was playing as well as he was in this game. But I also thought it was great that Khalil Shakir stepped up. I think he's one of the more underrated receivers in the NFL, so it's cool to have him see him have a big game too.
And even when you keep the ball away a little bit, when a team only punts once, even when obviously, the crazy fumbles in this game, I don't know how the ball bounces certain ways. I don't know how people recover it at full speed on a cold day like that. Just doesn't work out. And I do think, the Bills had some nice designs where they had that awesome 4th down play call where you see the receiver motion to one side of the quarterback. They usually just go behind the quarterback back to the other side, but there they fake it. And you can see the defender just fly off the screen because he's in man coverage. He needs to follow them. He wants to, cut off that receiver as quick as they can, especially I think it was like a 4th and 3 or 4. So it was a good job by the Bills offense in a lot of ways, and just, unfortunate, but we got to move on. Tej, unfortunately, like the Bills fans have to move on too. Going to go to conference championship weekend. Obviously Chiefs at Ravens and then Lions at 49ers. I think these are the best 4 teams. Do you agree with that? I feel like we're pretty lucky with these 4.
Yeah, I think so. I think these are the best 4 teams.
You don't have to answer if you don't want to. I will say I feel like they're the best 4.
Yeah.
But is it a you still can't quit Josh Allen thing that
I still can't quit the Bills? I'm going to take it to my grave that they were one of the best 4 teams in the NFL this year. Maybe not top 2 in the AFC because I guess it played out like that, but Bills would be favored against the Lions as much as they love the Lions.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, the Bills, maybe they're the best team in the league other years that they didn't win the Super Bowl, but we're not getting into that. I think for conference championship, we'll just do a quick preview. We'll maybe do one thing to focus on for each team. I think maybe you'll give one, I'll give one, or at least within each matchup, offense versus defense. And then Tej, I think I'll ask you to kind of make the case for both of the quote underdogs in this game, which is Kansas City. Mahomes is an underdog, and then the Lions. So why don't you start off with kind of one thing you're looking for with Kansas City offense versus Baltimore's defense?
So I am really interested in seeing how Kyle Hamilton follows Travis Kelce in this game. Are they going to have Hamilton straight up play man coverage on Kelce? Are they going to mix and match more with, Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, and Hamilton all like alternating on Kelce? That's what I'm most curious to watch in this game.
Yeah, that was interesting. I was trying to look at the numbers a little bit, and I think like Hamilton, his man coverage snaps are relatively low across the board. They play a lot of zone. But then even like man on tight end, it was like 10 or 15 snaps where he was only targeted one time. It was like a 3-yard pass or he's targeted 3 times, only 1 completion. So I'm interested to see that as well. And I think they have I think they will have different answers. That's something that Mike Macdonald understands so well, that it is not just, this player is going to be able to erase the other person. You have to have multiple ways, whether it's sending one person at them, whether it's having like zone double teams where a guy from the other side is kind of getting there. That's going to be a fun one to watch because Kyle Hamilton is special and Travis Kelce is special. So that's a good one. For me, I think I really just want to know, look, what are the Ravens going to do when the Chiefs lean into that 12 personnel and really particularly that 13 personnel grouping, where I guess you answer a little bit where against the Texans, the Ravens are more than happy to roll a player into the box, even against a team where they are known for beating those one high looks. I wonder if Baltimore is just comfortable in some of their matchups where you really need to be able to deal with Kelce. You really need to be able to deal with Rice. And then after that, I think, as we mentioned, our magic rule of 3 offensive weapons, is it MVS being able to step up for another big game? Is, where is it? I think that as a Ravens defense, like they are really going to hyper prioritize it's got to be someone else, right? Every team says that. It's easy to say, it's harder to do, and you hope it's not just Mahomes kind of scrambling around. So let's flip it to the other side. Tage, what are your thoughts on Ravens offense versus Kansas City's defense?
I am very excited to see how Steve Spagnuolo, how often he sends 6+ pass rushers in this game. It was something DeMeco Ryans did a lot. Previously gave the Ravens offense some trouble in the first half. They obviously figured out in the second half. The Ravens had the second highest rate of facing 6+ pass rushers as charted by FTN this season, and they were 13th in EPA per play when seeing a pretty heavy blitz. And we know Spagnuolo likes to do that in playoff games and in these types of environments. So I think that he should do that a lot in this game, but it'll be interesting to see how the Ravens handle that. And then if he backs off of that, if the Ravens are doing well off of it.
Yeah, Tage, I think it is so important to think about what is Spags gonna really do to deal with Lamar Jackson in so many ways. Mine is kind of a cop-out. I think that, you have to outplay Patrick Mahomes for one game. Is that a little bit of the defense being able to suppress Mahomes in different ways? Is it that Lamar just, we're able to reach the 100th percentile performance? You get those really, really pretty green boxes on our game reviews. I can't wait. I can't wait for that game. That one's going to be fun. Another game that obviously both of us are so excited for, San Francisco against Detroit. Thinking about San Francisco's offense first, I just have a hard time thinking the Lions are going to be able to have success stopping the San Francisco offense, particularly because we just saw Tampa Bay have that success on the ground, where it felt like through a lot of the season, Tampa Bay's run game was, sometimes burning some of those first downs, which I don't love that saying, but I feel like it does kind of accurately describe it. Like, San Francisco is going to be able to have success in their zone running game because Tampa Bay was able to, and we've seen San Francisco be better than Tampa Bay in so many ways. So when you have those gashing runs, then I think you can, you're going to force more players in the box on the defense. That way, Purdy's able to get to some of those middle of the field attacking throws in different ways. You hope for no rain if you're rooting for San Francisco. And I mean, we got to talk about just what's going to happen in terms of a wide receiver one versus the Lions defense. Is Brandon Ayuk just going to, get those triple digits and really attack? So what are your kind of your thing to focus on a little bit for San Francisco offense versus Detroit's defense?
Okay, I think about this like basically every hour of every day of how the Lions defense is going to stop the 49ers offense. And I think that Aaron Glenn is going to go with a lot of 3 and even 4 safety looks in this game. Whether you play a heavy box or a light box against San Francisco, they're going to be able to run the ball effectively. It's what they've done the entire season. They rank top 5 in both success rate against both types of boxes. So if you come out with your best players who are majority safeties in your back 7, I think you do have a chance to stop their passing attack. So, it's a lot of Brian Branch. It's a lot of Kirby Joseph, Ife Melifonwu, and CJ Gardner-Johnson. I think that those 4 safeties might have a big impact on this game, and they're going to have to play a lot to help the corners that have been struggling for the Lions.
Yeah, we will see. Tage, let's go to the opposite side. Detroit offense versus San Francisco defense. Obviously the Lions and a lot of, I think, the top offenses want to find ways to attack the middle of the field. So I want to see what is your response when you have Fred Warner that is able to erase a lot of the middle of the field. Are you going to be able to have success pushing the ball outside those numbers where Green Bay was able to attack in a few different ways? And you think of that late Goff to Amon St. Brown throw on that left side where it's third and like 15 or something, and you're able to complete that pass. So, what do you do when the middle of the field is taken away? Are you able to attack the outside like Green Bay? What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point to bring up. I think it's definitely going to be tough to pass over the middle of the field. But what I do think the Lions can and will do in this game is they're going to run the ball a lot. We talked about how they had a really high pass rate over expected against the Buccaneers because the Buccaneers pass defense is not that good relative to their run defense. 49ers are the exact opposite of that. They rank 25th in EPA per rush allowed. Obviously, their pass defense is really good. And I think that the Lions are going to lean into David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, the offensive line behind Penei Sewell in this game, and just hope that they can run the ball on the 49ers.
Yeah, that one's interesting. I think when we look back to when the Lions played the Cowboys and the Cowboys were kind of taking that approach where, you got to get someone upfield and try and get a tackle for loss. I think San Francisco should be able to create some of those tackle for losses where even you saw it against Green Bay where Aaron Jones was able to have success a lot of times, but you knife upfield enough times, you get a tackle for loss, you force that field goal instead of a touchdown. I want Jahmyr Gibbs to just I want him to get the ball 25 times, whether it's, even in the pass game, whether it's, I'd love to just see, Fred Warner and him deal with each other in space. I think that's going to be just like a fun athletic matchup. Do you want to make the case for the underdogs in this between, you can do Kansas City first, and then we'll talk about that a little bit, and then Detroit?
Okay, yeah, let's make the case for these underdogs in these games.
We're calling Patrick Mahomes an underdog. Like I recognize the futility in that specific exercise, but I do think it's a good way to think a little bit about maybe game flow, for example.
For sure, yeah. And not saying these teams will win or anything. If they do end up winning, this is how I think that it'll play out. So from the Chiefs' perspective, number one, playoff Patrick Mahomes. There is only one quarterback with a higher EPA per play since 2018 in the playoffs that has played at least 3 games. That's Matthew Stafford. But Patrick Mahomes has done it on a much larger sample size. It's more impressive. You're going to get playoff Patrick Mahomes in this game, which means scrambling when he is given the opportunity. He usually turns up the amount of scramble yards he has in playoff games. His rushing yards increases by about 8 yards from the regular season to the playoffs, which can mean 1 or 2 extra first downs in this game. And then I also think that if the Chiefs were to win this game, it would be a big secondary receiver game. So if you have MVS step up again, like he did last week, or you have some other receivers make a big difference in this game, I think that can be the difference, even if the Ravens are trying their best to take away Rice and Kelsey. On the defensive side of things, it's what we talked about earlier, where the blitzes actually do get home and affect Lamar Jackson. They are able to come in from the edges. Chris Jones is lined up and the edge, and he's able to come in and contain the pocket so that Lamar Jackson's not able to escape. And then he's turning into, having some sacks in this game, like we've seen, where in the rare games that the Ravens have struggled on offense this year.
Yeah, decent case. I think obviously the most compelling is playoff Patrick Mahomes. It's hard to ever argue against that. I wonder, especially if the Chiefs win, who is their third player there? Is it just, where we got to see MBS make a bunch of plays against the Bills? And when I think about the arc of this season from the Ravens perspective on defense, McDonald shutting down these Shanahan offenses in different ways and really being able to be smart in what parts of the field that they're defending and where they're dropping to in their zone coverage. The Chiefs, their offense functions differently because it is a lot of times where Kelsey is, it's more where he's feeling out the space and finding areas to settle into. So it is a little bit of a different style from that perspective. I am glad on the Baltimore side that, flipping it around, that the Ravens offense we saw a very clear, this is what it looks like for a team to have a first half where they're kind of beaten in a little bit of one way and then react to it in the second half in terms of the blitz. So I do think, the Kansas City defenders, like Spags has had so many good designs in so many different ways. Maybe it's some of those simulated pressures in different ways where they force Lamar one way and you get the safety kind of coming off the edge there. So why you can go ahead and make the case for the Lions against the 49ers.
All right. Lions case is a little bit tougher, but, touches on some of the stuff that we've talked about. On the Lions offensive side of things, they are going to have to break off explosive rushes in this game. We saw the Packers be able to do that from time to time against them. And I think that the Lions, if they're running behind their tackles with Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, are going to be able to take advantage of players on the edge like Chase Young in the run game and really make an impact from that. And then again, I think when you look at Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson and what they've done in these so-called house money games, we could see some trick plays from the Lions as well, where they are, us Lions fans, we're just really happy to be here. We want to take advantage of this moment. So we are going to put out some trick plays in this game, whether it's fake special teams plays or actual trick plays from a down-to-down basis. On the defensive side of things, this is pretty obvious for every team, but you actually do need to take advantage of the interceptable balls in this game if you were given the opportunity to do so. I think that that's something that the Packers weren't able to do last week. But when we've seen the 49ers offense falter this season, it's only been really because of turnovers. The Ravens game, the Browns game, the Vikings game, all the games that they lost was because of the turnovers in this game. And then you also need to have a really big game from your linebackers where you are able to slow down Christian McCaffrey to an extent, and clean up some of the run issues that you had last week, but also clean up in the middle of the field if George Kittle is going over there or Brandon Ayuk is running a crossing route across it.
Yeah, I don't know if you're at the stadium and you're a Lions fan, do you like take a water bottle and like try and recreate rain or to do something to affect Purdy? I do think I'd be interested to see, hopefully, Detroit's defensive line, if they're able to, I mean, are they as skilled as the Packers interior? Like, you don't have Kenny Clark. I will say that. I feel comfortable saying that. But I think you can maybe win at some points along the offensive line. I do think, like you mentioned, that you can have success running against this 49ers defense. But Tej, I don't know. Like I have this third downtown sign right here for those people watching YouTube for going to, or was there for one of the preseason Lions games. Maybe like if the Lions win, I'll like hold it up the entire time in honor of this. I'm just having a hard time seeing it. It's easy to say, oh yeah, you're gonna choose the number 1 seed team to win. I do think that like the Lions are gonna have one chance to intercept a Brock Purdy pass, and you have to come down with it. You can't be like the Bucs in the game against the Lions where you drop that. It's in a game like we keep saying the margins are so thin, and it is likely it happens based on the way that the offense is designed, where a defender is going to be able to undercut. All right, you're going to be able to get one. You got to come down with it. So anything else you want to say about either of these matchups before we head on out of here, Tej?
I mean, one of the best Sundays of the year. The intensity, some of the games that we get on this Sunday, I think are going to be really fun. If it does end up being Ravens 49ers in the Super Bowl, like we thought midseason, like we thought going into the playoffs with them being the 1 seeds, like I think that would be a pretty good Super Bowl matchup, but you can't really go wrong with any of the outcomes of these games as long as players stay healthy.
Tej, I think we talked about it on the Halloween episode. We know that you're a big candy guy. When you're like nervous watching, I think you mentioned like what has your nervous watching process been maybe over the last few weeks?
It's a lot of chocolate. Like I said, it'd be better if I had like, I think I could stress eat anything basically. Like if it was vegetables I didn't like or something, like I should probably get that in front of me before this Sunday's game. But I've just been grabbing a lot of chocolate and downing it, which can't be healthy, but will hopefully be worth it.
Tej, I always worry. All right, we got to get out of here. I worry about your blood pressure always, Tej. Let's be as good as we can. I'm excited to text through it all on Sunday. Thanks everyone again for listening to another episode of Stats and Scheme. Tell us what you like, what you didn't like, and what your suggestion for Tej to eat nervously while watching the Lions 49ers game should be. Make sure you visit SumerSports.com. Follow us on Twitter @SumerSports. Most importantly, enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next time.